All right, now we're officially underway. Were there any other announcements? Okay, let's move on to new business. The koha-US conference registration is open. There is a link in the agenda. As I just checked a moment ago, we have 130 total registrants. 30 of those are in person. There's a number of people who are presenting and that we know will be there that have not registered yet. So I know that our number is going to get a bit higher than that, but we do offer both the online and the in-person option. I always want to, I understand not everybody can travel every year and go to all the conferences, but we have some exciting stuff planned with the cultural stuff. We have a venue that's close to an airport. That was a big thing we heard last year as a concern. And there is restaurants and accommodations nearby the library where the conference is being held. Not just that, but all the networking and the side conversations that you have in person that are really hard to recreate online. So I would just advocate, if you can make it in person, there is definitely value added. And I understand that even though we're not charging a whole lot for the conference, that there are other expenses to get there. So it's not easy for everybody, but I definitely recommend trying to get there if at all possible. We'll be doing some additional marketing on this that you'll see to try to, as we get a little closer. I mean, the conference is just a little over 2 months away, which is pretty crazy. So we're getting down to it. I will imagine there's probably not a ton of questions on conference, but please let me know if you have any. Otherwise, I think I want to turn it over to one of the representatives from Bywater to talk a little bit about how the community challenge went.
I don't know if Jesse, you want to go or do you want me to go?
You go.
Or you could both do it.
Well, okay, I'll let Jesse do the grand total raise, but I'll just start by saying thank you so much for participating and promoting this to all of your colleagues and friends. We had some great engagement in the Facebook group this year, people posting pictures of the amazing places they did activity, people commenting saying it really helped them get motivated. So more than just a fundraiser, it was just a really great community event. And we had 60 participants this year. And we logged over 1,500 minutes of activity. That's a lot of activity. I mean, people are really moving and grooving this year. And I'm going to let Jesse give the grand total of the money raised.
So we raised $1,500. Now, a little bit comes out per registrant, but that's huge, huge numbers again. So we're very, very excited. You know, when we started the Koha Community Challenge 4 years ago, the goal was just to get people together and like really feel like a community and share ideas and feedback. And as Elise mentioned, it was so positive this year. People were sharing, you know, their pictures as they were climbing mountains or like running, or Bob when he was going for a walk and he had his child with him, you know, like all these great things. Or Brendan Lawler when he did Koha on his Strava map. Like how freaking cool was that? Okay, going to take that energy level down and I'm going to make Nate stand up and show his Koha Community Challenge shirt because he's wearing it today. So thanks y'all so much for letting us be a part of this, and we're excited to do it all over again next year.
How do we get our t-shirts, Jesse?
Go ahead, Elise.
Okay, we're going to be sending them out in the next few days. I'll put the form, we sent a form out in the email to all the participants the other day, or you can always just email outreach@bywatersolutions.com if you prefer doing it that way. Yeah, but so we'll be sending them out in the next few days.
I'll double check my email. I don't remember seeing it, but it's possible.
Let me share a link real quick.
I got it. I just was pulling it up. It was kind of
Yeah.
buried in another message a little bit.
Okay, I'll double check. I've been kind of working from home. My nephew's graduating, so I've been working from home, and I missed it. So I'm
Yeah,
half
I
working,
know.
half on vacation.
I know I definitely did a bit more activity than usual until I ended up throwing my back out towards the end of the month. So I had a heavy workout May, and I'll be doing a resting June.
I did really well. I was walking. I mowed my lawn, my mother's lawn, and the neighbor, because we had heart surgery, and I forgot to log all my minutes and my steps. I got so busy, I forgot to log it.
Well, thanks again to Bywater for setting all this up and working with us on this. Just a reminder that money we take in will go back into the community as a development, which is an awesome segue to my next topic, and that is the development committee updates. As Andrew mentioned right before we started recording, bug 32256 officially got pushed to the 2405 release. So that was our most recent contribution to the community, using funds raised both through the community challenge and also membership fees. The next thing we are going to be looking at doing is putting out a vote for what we want to fund next. And we've kind of been evaluating what's out there. And in some cases, some of the things, the price tag is a bit higher than we can commit to. So I just want to call out that if you have something you want to vote on, our new process is you will want to work with Bywater to get your idea on the Bywater crowdsourcing page. And then we can consider that for a vote. And that doesn't matter whether or not you're a Bywater customer or not. They'll put something up there. We've talked with them about that, and if you want to put some money towards it, our budget is, like I said, it's a little bit more in that 4,000 or less range, roughly. So some of these that are on there sound like really cool ideas. They're just like, when it's 10 grand, it's a little bit more than we can cover. So the other way we can always do stuff is if you see something on there that's more expensive and your organization can contribute to that pledge, that gets the cost down, makes it more attainable for koha-US to be able to participate in helping fund that. So there's a few different options there. But I would encourage anyone that has something they think would benefit the community, an idea they have, that you get that going, and you can contact us. We're not opening voting like right away or anything like that. So there's some time to get some new ideas out. Andrew, as the chair of the development committee, is there anything I'm overlooking or missing?
Broadly, I'd say if you've got a partially formed idea of something that you think would be a cool development in Koha and you're not quite sure how to go about firming that idea up and getting a quote from Bywater and stuff, that would be a great thing to bring to the development meeting. Or even just email me at vicepresident@koha-US.org. Or andrewfh@dubcolib.org, or find me on Slack or whatever. Like, I hope I'm easy to find. My name is weird. Yeah, as Bob says, we've got a lot of big things that we could commit some money to and kind of wait, or we could hold off a year. But I suspect amongst all the members of Koha, yes, there are people out there with small, impactful ideas that would really make Koha cooler, which is a nice space for us to live in. Sort of small, user impactful changes.
Absolutely. Okay, I think we're ready to move on, and I am happy to introduce Andrew Auld. He's the commercial director of PTFS Europe, and he's going to just give us some updates on how things are going, what development priorities are for the UK libraries and that sort of stuff. So welcome, Andrew. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm going to do a presentation if that's okay. So I'll share my screen and then crack on with that. So do let me know if you can see that.
Yes, we are good.
Great stuff. Right. I kind of start presentations with views of Europe quite often. This is a totally unseasonable view, or you'd think so, but actually right now the weather is blooming freezing here in the UK. So we've got a northerly airflow, and everyone has got their fleece jackets back on and their down jackets back on, and we're not enjoying it at all, and nor are the vegetables in the garden. So a picture of me skiing in March in Italy didn't seem that amiss, actually. And by the way, that's a beautiful place to go if you're ever over in Europe. And Italy was the theme, actually, to introduce our big news last year, which you know about, but I just thought I'd recap. And that was that two of our long-standing, and in fact, Nick, one of our founding directors, retired, and Ian with him. And that obviously opened up the opportunity for Brendan and Nate to join us. And this is another Italian view. So this is where we actually signed the deal at Nick's lovely villa in Italy. So another beautiful place to go to in Italy if you ever get the chance, in the sort of Barga region. Beautiful, really lovely. And we were so delighted to welcome Brendan and Nate onto the board of PTFS Europe. And we're really well, I think all four of us are loving how this is going. There's some real strength to the partnership. For us, it's all about getting closer to Bywater Solutions, and hopefully Bywater Solutions feeling the same, that they're getting closer to us and we're working closer together. We've known each other for a long time and we've worked together for a long time, but this is like really strengthening that relationship. From this group's perspective, I think there are some real benefits for all our libraries jointly, that we can leverage benefits of scale in terms of development opportunities, access to resources, sharing knowledge, and those kind of things. For us as a company, it's obviously it was always going to be when you have directors that want to retire. It's a conundrum to work with, and in fact, I was given that task when I joined PTFS Europe 5 years ago. That was my #1 job, was to work out how to facilitate Nick and Ian's retirement. And this has been a great result for us, because you know, we feel that our future is in fantastic hands with the 4 directors now working together. And hopefully it keeps us all competitive against the proprietary vendors. That's a big goal. Independent companies thriving is what we need. And just so that it's not all shots of continental Europe, this was Brendan being introduced to Chatsworth House in Derbyshire, and connecting with some of his aristocratic relatives when he came to visit in March. And that's another great thing, is that we're seeing more of our Bywater colleagues, which is terrific, particularly obviously Brendan and Nate. I thought it'd be interesting for you to just understand a little bit about the toings and froings here at PTFS Europe. And I'm going to talk a bit about the staff complement, but we have had a lot of changing staff of late, but particularly a growth in the developer team. And 2022, we had 3 new developers come on board. In 2023, some more another developer, and then various other new staff as well. And we're recruiting right now for 2 more developers and a marketing exec. So we're really beefing up the development team and our development capability, and I'll touch on that in a bit later. Just to give you an idea of where we all are, like Bywater, we're a virtual company, so we're scattered everywhere, and that's everywhere in the UK. And actually, you may know of Pedro Amarin. He's our developer who lives out in the Azores, so that's his little spot out in the Azores. And now, of course, we have to make the map even smaller scale and take in Brendan and Nate. So that's how our map looks now, which is very exciting for us. Just to give you a little bit of a flavor of the sorts of libraries that we're working with, these are new customers in the last 12 months or so that we've welcomed onto either Koha or Aspen or both. And it's a real spread of different sectors that we work with. So I'm sure your group represents different sectors as well, but it might be interesting for you to understand exactly our spread of sectors. Academics, obviously, publics, obviously, but also special libraries and government libraries, and in particularly on the next slide, health libraries. And then I've highlighted a couple of new Aspens there that were funded by some government funding, some Arts Council and British Library funding. Library On is a British library project funded by the Arts Council, and that's been a really good way of some of our existing Koha libraries to start to use Aspen through that funding. So we're really excited about that. And in terms of the NHS, National Health Service, our free at the point of use service for us, very different health model to yourselves. We have massive business in our health libraries. So these are hospital libraries or primary care trust libraries. And we now have, of 8 regions in England, 6 of those regions use a Koha consortial system. And these phases that you see are all about bringing more and more of the trust libraries that live in those regions into the one consortial system. And we've been doing this project now for about 2.5 years, and we're still at it for the next sort of 12 months. And we're also really hoping that in about 12 to 18 months' time, we're going to be gaining the final 2 regions of the 8 regions. So that will give almost 100% coverage of health libraries on Koha in the UK, which will be terrific. But it's not just Koha, or not just simple implementation of library systems. They're funding a lot of development, and ILDS in health speak stands for interlibrary document supply, so ILL in more common parlance, and they're funding a huge redevelopment, more of that later on the ILL module. And they're also looking at Aspen, and they're very interested in the new ERM functionality as well. So it's a very rich relationship we have with NHS England. In terms of recent developments, and this would sort of, again, looking back sort of 12 months or so, we were instrumental in implementing the development of the ERM module and working on the ERM module. In particular, adding most recently usage statistics in 23.11, that's landed. And then we've done some earlier work on interlibrary loans, specifically around copyright acceptance and copyright disclaimers. Again, that was funded by the NHS, but we're now doing, and this has been preparatory work for the bigger piece that we're doing on ILL right now. Reprint Desk is a mediation service for interlending used in our health service, and that's a very important integration that we've written for that, alongside the other backends that we support here for local interlending requirements. Bookings module, I'm going to talk a bit more about that, but that was landed last year as well. Work on cookie consent, trusted self-checkout. There's a few other things detailed on that slide. I'm going to circulate these slides so you can read at your leisure. But and this is like history in a way, because it's like past developments that you should all be soon benefiting from, if not already benefiting from. And I thought it worth talking about our tech background as well, and our tech team and some of the work that we're doing there. So we've been doing a huge amount of migration during our last year's upgrade cycle, and again topping that off in this year's upgrade cycle, because we had a lot of our systems were with a hosting provider that we're now moving away from for various reasons, and we're on old hardware, and so we've been speeding up their services by migrating onto new hardware, but that's been a big job for the tech team, and they've been, as part of tackling that task, they've been working on automating more of the processes and working quite closely with Bywater Solutions on ideas for automation in this tech area, which is really great. And we're seeing some really good results from what they're now able to automate in terms of installations or upgrades and those kind of activities. And improving our monitoring and reporting has been part of that as well. And then the last bullet is kind of one of the most important for us in terms of our businesses accreditation, really. And we have an accreditation called Cyber Essentials, which has been developed by the UK Cybersecurity Agency. So that's our lead governmental organization that looks after cybersecurity in the UK. And they have this accreditation, and we're pretty sure we're the only LMS provider to have Cyber Essentials Plus accreditation, which is a much more difficult accreditation to achieve than just the basic Cyber Essentials. So we're really pleased with that. And it's coming up more and more as a requirement for the libraries that we're working with, particularly in the health sector. Sadly, you may have heard in the news, just yesterday, some hospitals in London, a lot of hospitals in London had to cancel a load of operations because of another ransomware attack on hospital systems. So these threats are very, very real. And the more that we can do to secure against them, the better. So these hurdles are getting very big for us to jump, and quite rightly so. So looking forward on the development front, these are some of the things that we're working on now. There's further work to be done on cost per use, so on ERM cost per use. So the ERM module will really, I think, come into its own when we add that cost per use functionality. We've got the specification nailed now, and we're just starting on the development. So that should be, I think, we're trying to target 24.11. We'll see. There is some complexities and some dependencies around the work we're doing on acquisitions. So that's to come. There is, as I say there, a linkage to the acquisitions work we're doing into the acquisitions module. There's more to do on bookings, ILL, acquisitions, task management, and module dashboards. I'm going to cover these things in a bit more detail on the next slides. I don't know how much time I've got, Bob.
We got plenty of time.
Okay, cool. Right. I won't dwell too long on the slides, but I will go through the next few slides, taking a bit more detail on these bullet points. So just looking at the ERM module, if you've looked at this at all yet, and I know that Kelly and Jessie have put out some really great videos on the ERM module as it stands currently. You've got agreements, licenses, e-holdings, the linkage with EBSCO's knowledge base for e-holdings if you're using that. And then there's the usage bit, which brings in the Sushi-enabled usage statistics into Koha and enables reporting on the usage of any electronic resources that you can connect to via the data providers that you have and those that are Sushi-enabled. And there's also the ability to upload KBOT files for those providers that don't have Sushi capability. So that's all really exciting. I don't know whether anyone has any questions about ERM or where it's going next. If you do, shout up, because I can't see everyone's face. So
this is just I just want to say, Andrew, we're excited for the cost per use. We're very excited about that.
Yeah, we're excited too. It's quite complicated to do though, so yeah. But anyway, we can still be excited. Great. Bookings. Again, some of you may already be using this, and great if you are. And we've got some great support from the US in terms of supporting the direction of where Martin is particularly working on this a lot, is going with the bookings module. And there's quite a lot he's added for 24.05. And there's a bit more to come for 24.11. So the bookings module is getting richer all the time. And I'm sorry I had to join the meeting and then run to the loo, but I literally drove back from a conference in time for this meeting, and it was a very good public libraries conference, and there was quite a lot of excitement about the bookings module there among people I was talking to about it. So these are some of the things that are coming soon, some of which may already have landed in 24.05, but the rest of which will be delivered in time for 24.11. So hourly bookings, bookable at item type level, and you can read for yourself. So lots more to come. And if you're excited about that bug tree, then I think it was on an earlier slide, the tree relating to the bookings development. So anyone that likes to get involved in testing, then please, Martin would love help with testing on the last bits of that development. ILL, I don't know how many of you use the ILL module, but there's a lot of use here. And in particular, as I said, it's very important for our NHS libraries that we develop that ILL module. And what we're adding to that is some, it says ILL 2.0 because we're actually rethinking the way the ILL module works. And where those of you who are familiar with it, when you start an ILL request at the moment, the first thing you have to do is select the back end. So you have to, where do I want to get the ILL from? And from both a staff point of view and an end user point of view in the OPAC, why would they know where they, that's not a starting point. So what they want to start with is, this is what I'd like to borrow. I can't find it locally, so I'm trying to do an ILL. Where can I get it? So we're turning it on its head. So that's why we're calling it ILL 2.0, because it's a radical re-engineering of how ILL actually works. And then within that re-engineering, we're introducing automation. So what you'll be able to do, again, for those familiar with ILL, at the moment, there are things called backends, which are the sources for ILL that you can choose from. So for us in the UK, the British Library is an ILL backend. As I mentioned earlier, Reprints Desk is a health-related ILL backend, and then what's called the form and got the name of it now, but the standard form is another ILL backend. Pedro's re-engineered those backends to be added as plugins. So where backends at the moment are sort of backside configuration-y things that you have to get support to get them added and configured. The backends will in future be delivered as plugins in the plugin area, and you'll be able to add and configure them yourselves. And within that, in the system preferences, if you've got multiple backends, you'll be able to start to say, well, which ones am I enabling? Or sorry, plugins. Which ones am I enabling and in what priority order? So you'll be able to swap around which is it going to go to first and see if there's availability there and in which order of priority. And it'll deliver the results in that order of priority when it does a search against ILL. So this is the automation then that's in there. So you've submitted a request. You said, I want to borrow this resource. And it's gone off and looked at which plugins are enabled, and it's doing an automatic, I'm going to check all of these for availability and give you the results of that and say, well, it's available here, it wasn't available here. And always you've got an option to just start a form and send it off to a partner library or wherever you might otherwise facilitate an ILL request. And it'll make a recommendation based on your preferences. And there will be some configuration about in the OPAC whether you actually force them to take the free option rather than forcing them to, or allowing them to take the not so free option. So there is further control there around how it handles that prioritization. So the same automation happens in the OPAC. This previous screen was in the staff side, and then the same automation would happen in the OPAC as well. And then from an OPAC perspective, it's going to place the ILL as before, and then you'll be able to manage your ILL requests as before. So that's ILL. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else I need to add about that. We're adding various other plugins, so providers as part of that. Oh yes, the other thing I'll add is that we're developing the ILL module in accordance with ISO 18626, the international standard around interlibrary lending. And what that means is that we're also working in partnership with developers in Helsinki, Koha developers in Helsinki, who are doing the supplier side part of ILL in Koha. And again, in line with the ISO 18626 standards. So the idea there is that in Koha, you'll be able to see the from your staff side or user side perspective, the loans that you're requesting from elsewhere coming in, and you're the borrower library in that context. But also in future, you'll be able to facilitate and see the outgoing into lending activity that you have as a supplier library. And see those resources disappear out of your collection, manage those supply into loans, and manage the return of them back when they come back or they get released having been used if they're electronic loans. And the 18626 standard means that that interaction between the supplier and the lending library in an ILL context can talk to each other irrespective of which library management system they are. So, for example, ALMA from Ex Libris is ISO 18626 compliant, meaning that we could interlend between a Koha and an ALMA system. And you can also obviously interlend between a Koha and a Koha because they're both ISO 18626 compliant, or they will be. And so both those institutions will be able to see both the supply and the borrowing side of the interaction. So that's the sort of future vision of ILL and where it's heading. So hopefully that will be of use to people as that lands. And a lot of that work is being funded by NHS England. In terms of acquisitions 2.0, and for anyone that tuned into the Hackfest or the output of the Marseille Hackfest, we had a very useful set of sessions at in Marseille around this reworking of acquisitions in Koha. Again, it's 2.0 because it really is going to be, it is an opportunity for us to fundamentally overhaul that module and bring it in line with current acquisitions requirements that libraries have. And so we're developing, and we've chosen to develop it in a way that means that we can develop it in parallel with the current acquisitions module without affecting the current acquisitions module, because it's going to be a long development project, around 18 months, we think. And we're going to develop it alongside, but in such a way as when it gets to a point where it's functional enough for some libraries to use, they'll be able to choose to use it. So they don't have to wait right till the very end necessarily of the development before they can use it. And so you may or may not have heard that we're using plugin architecture to develop the acquisitions 2.0 work. That's not, the intention isn't that it's a plugin long term, but that's allowing us to move in an agile way with the development and in a flexible way with the development. So if you hear on the grapevine that acquisitions is going to be a plugin in the future, that's not quite true. What's happening is we're using plugin architecture to help us to develop it in an agile and a quick way. And some of the elements of the module will lend themselves to stay as plugins because might enable libraries to implement parts of the acquisitions module, but not other parts. So some bits may remain as plugins, but much of it will move into core Koha when the time is right. So I just wanted to sort of preface the few slides that we've got in terms of how this is going so far with that context. Matt Blenkinsop is the lead developer on this. So if you do have questions and comments, feed them through to us, and it'll be Matt that'll handle that. He's already done these were slides that this was real screens working stuff that he showed at Marseille. I'm not clever enough to have a sandbox environment installed to show you for the real. These are just screenshots, but this is where he'd got to by the time we were in Marseille. So Funds and Ledgers was built, and he had some ability to relate funds to ledgers and manage moving funds from one fund to another and those kind of things. The ability to set up fiscal years was already there, and manage fiscal years, and work on different ledgers. So ledgers is a new concept that will get explained as the development progresses as to how ledgers fit into the structure of the ILL module. I think this is about transferring money from one fund to another. So there's plenty that's there already, there as in very much developed and working on a developer instance. And there's a lot of work on this ongoing, and it's going to be quite a big piece of work, as you can imagine. And we've got a number of different libraries who are contributing thoughts and ideas to the development as we work on it, and we will welcome. And there's been plenty of suggestions and input has come from the US already via Jessie and via other conversations we've had. So we're definitely sort of casting wide the net in terms of understanding what the needs are out there in terms of this module. There we go, transferring between funds. And it's not only Koha. I know this is koha-US, so I won't talk too much about Aspen, but we are working in Aspen as well. These are some of the areas that we're working on. We recently added a connector to Summon in the similar vein to the EDS connector. Any of you who do use Aspen and have a connection to EDS will know what I'm talking about there. We've come to the end of doing some work on enhancing the web builder in Aspen, and we're now embarking on some fun work that's being primarily funded by Cuiper to develop a marketing and engagement piece within Aspen, particularly focused around the Summer Reading Challenge initially, but other event engagement tooling within Aspen. And then the things that we're developing in Koha that have an OPAC context. So ILL and bookings will have an OPAC context in Koha. We'll also be making sure that they're exposed correctly in Aspen. So this automation of interlibrary lending will be available in the Koha OPAC, but the same functionality we're going to be exposing in Aspen as well. And similarly, the bookings integration, the bookings work that is being exposed to the OPAC will get exposed to Aspen as well. And that's all development to be worked on in the next few months. And Pedro, if you know Pedro, he's our in the middle of the Atlantic developer. Pedro is going to be tackling quite a lot of those Aspen chunks because he's been the lead developer on the Kurulla. So it makes sense that he brings that work into Aspen when he gets his teeth into Aspen in the next few weeks. And then just, again, this is not totally relevant to koha-US, but anyone that does use Metabase, just contextually, we don't develop in Metabase, so we're not Metabase developers, but we do keep an eye on what's being developed. And we've been particularly excited about, a few months ago, the addition of the ability to drill down on multiple data sets bring multiple data sets into Metabase. I did a bit of a video about this, and it enables you to do some really clever comparative modeling in Metabase that you weren't able to do before. So we were pretty excited about that. We keep an eye on the Metabase development happenings, and we bring any of these things out to our libraries that use Metabase when we spot them, so that they make use of those features and understand them. Just in terms of keeping in touch with us, there's a few ways you can do that. We have a YouTube channel. We do our regular Wednesdays, every other Wednesday, What's on Our Mind video. I think there's been one today about cookies that Auld has put together. And we also use our channel for webinars and open discussions. Not all of them will be US-friendly time zones, so apologies for that. But we tend to put recordings on, obviously, onto YouTube as well. But if you ever join our live sessions, you'd be most welcome to as well. Obviously, we have a LinkedIn page. I'm sure many of you will have heard about Mattermost as the Koha community chat platform that we implemented, and we're hosting that actually. We implemented at Hackfest after a session. It was really great. And you can find us all on there. And obviously there's our website, and you can find us in person at KohaCon and AspenCon. There's 4 of us definitely coming to Canada in September. So find us there. And if you want to know what we all look like, then this is most of the team. We were all together in March at one of our company meetings. There were 24 of us in total, including Nate and Brandon. And you can see Brandon was there. Nate couldn't make that one. And that was all I had for you today. So I hope that was useful.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. It's really interesting to see what the priorities are, what you're working on, and you seem like you're undertaking some really large-scale infrastructure projects, which is really cool.
I mean, actually, I realized that I've omitted a great big piece, and that is that as well as tackling the developments that I listed, we're also, as part of the partnership with Bywater Solutions, we're going to be working and are already working on a significant funnel of work that's coming from US libraries via Bywater Solutions. Because we have the capacity to tackle some of those development pieces. And so we are also, and I haven't really listed them, but we're already ticking off. There's a sort of fairly big list that we're working through of chunks of development that are sat with Bywater as requests from libraries in the US, and we're working on those as well. So we need these extra 2 developers to join our team very soon. Yeah, excitingly, for those that know any of our team, Jake Deary, who's one of our tech. So where is Jake on this picture? Where are you, Jake? There he is. That's Jake Deary. Jake is in our tech team, but he applied for one of our 2 developer positions. So he's moving to development. So the tech team are really upset today. We announced it today, but the dev team is really excited because he's been the main driving force behind getting Mattermost up and running and developing any of the extra bits, the bells and whistles on Mattermost. That's been Jake, because he's all over that, and he's very into, obviously, the coding side of things now, and is going to be working in the dev team. So we're very excited about Jake joining, and he's actually going to be tackling a lot of the US developments.
Well, we should have there's another topic we're going to discuss, but I think we have some time for questions for Andrew if anybody has anything. I know that we have a special interest group for acquisitions. It's probably excited to hear all the work that you're doing to improve that module. But any questions anybody has for Andrew? Kristi?
I lost it for a second. Oh, so I noticed that a lot of the clients that PTFS Europe is working with now are tend to be like government organizations. Do you have how many public libraries over in Europe would you say you're working with?
We have about 18-ish authorities, public library authorities that are using Koha. There's a cluster in the northwest of England, around the Liverpool area, and there's about 6 of them there. Then there's a cluster in the northeast, a cluster in Scotland, and a few then in the central area. We're yet to get any publics in the south of England, and all I'm going to say, because I don't want to jinx it, is watch this space. We are seeing increasing adoption of Aspen with those Koha libraries, which is great. I mentioned the library on funding, which has been really terrific to facilitate that. Yeah, so there's the answer to your question.
Thanks.
There's a question about the developer for the Acquisitions 2.0 in the chat. That's Matt Blenkinsop. And he's also working with Matt on that, is going to be Jacob, not Jake. We have a Jake and a Jacob. So Jacob O'Mara has been working on Aspen. So you may have seen his name in the Aspen community, and anyone who's using Aspen and came to AspenCon, Jacob was actually at AspenCon. And Jacob is now, we're doing, with our developers, we're not allowing them to stay too comfortable with one piece of software. They have to be able to switch. And so we're just doing a switcheroo at the moment, where Jacob is switching over to Koha from Aspen, and Pedro, as I mentioned, has been a real powerhouse Koha developer, and he's switching into Aspen. So Jacob is going to be working with Matt on the acquisitions 2 work and supporting Matt in that development.
Hi, Andrew. This is Rhonda Kuiper from Round Rock. I kind of lead the acquisitions special interest group. So I was interested in contacting Matt and, seeing if he could join one of our meetings sometime, just to show us what's coming up. Because, some of the things you've talked about are things that we've talked about in our meetings that we would like to have. So I'm sure people would be super excited to see that, there's progress being made and stuff. So that's why I was asking about who's the developer and just contact information. So if I would just go to Mattermost or something like that.
Well, if you come via me at this point, and I will make sure you get connected to Matt, and probably Jonathan as well. So Jonathan Field, our managing director, has been really fundamental to this project in terms of pulling together the specification and writing the specification and pulling into a sensible cohesion the very disparate requirements that we're seeing, that we're hearing about globally. So Jonathan would be good, I think, to hook in with that conversation, because he's got more of the future vision. Obviously, Matt's working on what he's working on right now, and he's tackling it chunk by chunk. And he can talk, definitely Matt can talk to you about the structural architecture that he's envisaging around it, as well as what he's already done and what he's doing right now. And then Jonathan can talk to the sort of overall vision of how it looks right now.
That would be great. That would be fantastic. All right, I will send you an email, and we can get
great.
connected.
It's in the slides, my email address, so
Okay.
I'll pop it in the chat as well.
I already did it.
Nate did already.
Oh, Nate did. Great. Oh, sorry, the messages aren't scrolling for me, so
Yeah, I just sent it to Rhonda, so you're not going to see it. It was
okay.
a message.
Thanks, Nate. Okay, yeah, I got those.
All right, well, the next thing we were going to discuss, actually, Andrew, one of the reasons I wanted to do it after we had you is because it's something you can probably speak to as well. But last month, Brendan shared with us that there was the idea of making Koha a foundation. And so at that point, we were kind of wrapping our heads around all that and wanted to see if he could come back and join us. And it was fortuitous that you're also able to join us, so we can see if we have some questions that we thought of over the past month. And I know the board, when we met, we brainstormed a few questions, but I want to open it up to, well, maybe we could do a quick recap of what the intention of that is before we open it up to questions. Brendan, do you want to do a quick recap of that?
Sure, or Andrew, you got it.
Okay, I'll go.
All right.
So, do you know, actually, this sort of came out of the change that I said for 5 years I'd been working on finding a way of replacing Nick and Ian, and along came Brendan and Nate. And I said in January or February to Jonathan, I'm feeling a little bit rudderless now. I've got my day-to-day work, but I've kind of, my big goal was doing that, and what are we going to do next? And so when Brendan was over, Jonathan and I then had some thoughts about the governance of Koha, the Koha project, and we had some concerns about just how well driven the project is at the moment, and whether the strategic push for the project is sufficient to continue, for the project to compete long into the future, and for the product to keep developing in a way that really matches the needs of libraries. And also just the ability for us to raise money is a real concern. So Jonathan and I chewed this thoughts around, and then when Brendan was over in March, we said to Brendan, look, we really feel like we need to do something about this. And Brendan was immediately on board, and he and Jonathan then embarked on a very detailed research project to look into what the benefits would be of moving the Koha project into a foundation, and what options we had as a community around foundations that exist, or starting your own foundation, or what were the options. And that work was pulled together into the proposal that Jonathan and Brendan wrote, presented first at Hackfest in Marseille in April, and on the back of the feedback from that session, further refined the proposal, and then published the proposal to the community for comment. And I'm sure you've seen the document that they put together. And then we were able to open the vote. My small part was being rudderless at the start, and then finding a way to vote, finding a platform to vote. That is still live for the next 10 days. So the ability for anyone in the community to have a vote is a key part of making sure it's a community-driven decision. The proposal, as you'll know, is that we land the Koha project in the Open Library Foundation, which is a light touch way of us having a home. The three of us met with the president of the OLF and the secretary in a really good meeting as part of the research that we were doing, and we were really excited by the light touch, but at the same time the good tooling that it would provide in terms of a community bank account just for us, so a Koha bank account, the ability then to raise funds as a project. The OLF don't skim off any of those funds, so that's a really good good thing. Obviously, there's a membership fee, but it's fairly low comparative to some of the other foundation options. We're taking 10 to 20% of whatever fundraising activity we would do as a community, which clearly is not great for us. So that was great, and just the governance or the constitutional structure that OLF has set up for the member organizations projects is really I think good and robust, and there's a real firewalling, air gapping between the governance of the OLF and what will be the governance of the Koha project. So the OLF governance will have nothing to do with the Koha project in terms of interfering with what our community goals and objectives and the way we structure our governance and so on. There are no diktats or anything like that. So that was a real upside we felt for the landing with the OLF. So that's the proposal. It's a yes/no vote, and it's out there right now. So any questions? Have I done the summary well enough, Brendan? Great.
Somebody who knows where that vote is, find it, a link, that would be helpful, and put it in the chat. I know one of our questions was how was the voting going to work, and I think that's largely been answered. One of my questions was, I know Brendan mentioned last time there would be some sort of board. How are our board officers going to be filled?
We're waiting for the vote to be done, and then we'll come up with an idea and present that and have feedback and everything. But that's no idea is set on that yet.
So it is a fluid situation.
Yes,
definitely.
Okay. I've got my list of questions we came up as a group at the board meeting, but does anybody else have any? I see some people shaking their head that came up with questions and probably forgot they came up with them. I think there was some conceptual, just trying to wrap our heads around, since nobody owns Koha, how can this be turned into a foundation? If that question makes sense.
So the project is kind of like owned by the license, right? By our GNU license. So basically what we're doing is we're taking those kinds of IP or assets, kind of, not any like trademarks or anything like that, but what we're doing is we're taking that and we're giving it like kind of a legal home. So that way, if there's anything that ever comes up, we have some legal representation, which currently we don't have. It's each commercial identity, each library that's part of it, they would fall back onto the license. And if there's anything that happened, anything that way, now we've got like a legal stand in that where we could protect those, protect the project rights.
I know there was another question we came up with, which I'm sure is going to be impossible for you to answer, but how would this affect the koha-US organization?
I think what it will allow is that what we could do with the koha-US, it could be part of that umbrella. I mean, it would both end up being 501c3s, at least in like the US nonprofit kind of thing. And I think interactions would happen that way. But we would know that like all of the protection for the code would be handled by the OLF Foundation Koha home.
Doesn't it like by extension also give koha-US another funding vehicle?
It could, yes. Yep.
And of course, you'd benefit from all the benefits that the greater community is going to see.
Yeah, and I was going to say one of the benefits from bringing the focus on funding together is, and providing a sort of a more active governance than we currently have, is that things like the tooling that we use for day-to-day things like managing the bugs and hosting test servers and hosting sandboxes and doing Mattermost, all those things that we have disparately owned, the Koha community website. We have the potential, and this isn't decided by any means because it will be for the future governance to decide how all this is going to work, but potentially we can house those under the foundation and get some economies of scale potentially, and attract funding to support those sort of boring things, and then attract funding also to do exciting things. So, and those are benefits that obviously will knock on to koha-US as part of the wider community.
Are there particular things that would require funding that you've been interested in doing and just not been able to because you haven't had the foundation?
You bet. So currently right now we are funding Jonathan Durant to be a QA person for Koha, and we are funding that through Bywater, PTFS Europe, and BibLeap. And so we each pay part of his monthly salary. And what we want to do is we want to have that rolled through the foundation instead. So we would be, we would be looking to kind of fund further positions like that, additional developers or additional QA people. So the big thing is that like now we have a spot where we can actually go after grants. We can go after different kinds of money that we can bring into the project. Maybe even have the release manager be a paid position. That like you could have 6 months off from your work, we would pay for that time, and then like you can go back to your normal work. There's lots of options in there, but the big thing would be, I think, like funding positions so we can get more done.
Yeah, and we were also recently, in addition to Jonathan, we're funding another developer on QA work. That's Victor Gruse, and we need to do more because we're doing more. So the more code we add to Koha, the more we need QA processes. The more security issues come up, the more we need those QA processes to be robust and working and supported by warm bodies, quite literally. It's great to be able to channel the funding for those resources more properly, because if those of you, many of you who I saw in Kansas and I did a presentation about funding QA work, and on the back of that we did have some disparate offers to pump some money into this, but we had no way of actually housing the money, and it didn't seem right to money launder the donations through PTFS Europe's bank accounts, and so we've never really made good on that goodwill that's out there, but we're not tapping into. Whereas this definitely provides a much cleaner and more regulated and clearer way of gathering those funds, not just from the community, but then from, as Brendan says, external and bigger ticket funders.
Like Koha-US got $10 million from the Mellon Foundation and, basically went nowhere. So now we could go after chunks like that and actually use it like in a good way because we're established,
Well, it's exciting to hear. I know QA is often a kind of a choke point where stuff gets bogged down in, so that's exciting to hear. We are a little bit past time, but if people want to continue to ask a couple of questions or things like that, as long as we have the availability of people to answer them, I think we can extend this a little bit depending on their time, but otherwise we'll have our next meeting next month, and that will be July 3rd, looks like. So first Wednesday in July. So we'll see you then. Anybody else have any other questions?
Just a clarification to go back to that question about like how would the foundation affect koha-US? My takeaway from that was it wouldn't really. Am I right in thinking that? Okay, just making
that's kind of my feelings, is that
okay.
Like koha-US is much more of a like a users group, and we're going to tackle education and joint development, a lot of those kinds of aspects with koha-US, and then the Koha Foundation under the OLF will tackle a lot more of the administration of the project.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Before we go, Barbara, I was at a birthday party this weekend, and I was wearing my Koha shirt. And let me just get the picture up. And this lovely woman came up to me and was like, "Oh, you're wearing a Koha shirt," and she's actually a volunteer at Bedford.
She is. She's a volunteer. She's part of the Friends. She's been on our board. She volunteers with me in technical services.
Yeah.
Very, very, very active. Her name is Janet.
Yes, yeah. So I was like, "Oh, you're at Bedford? Oh, that's Barbara Johnson." She was like, "Yeah." So we had a great talk. And so I said I would take the selfie and pass it on to you.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Any other questions out there?
Yeah, was the party in Oregon or was it in Texas?
Yeah. So
cool.
It was her granddaughter's birthday party. So she was at the party, and Sonia and I went with Janine.
Small world.
Yep.
Well, I think we're out of foundation questions. I don't know if we're out of party questions, but I think we'll go ahead and call it a day. Thank you, Andrew, so much for joining us, and Brendan as well.
Yeah, it's been lovely to see you all, and thanks very much for the invitation. And I'll hook up the acquisition session, and then anytime you want me or anyone else back at this meeting, we'd be delighted to come along.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Great. And I will see you in September.
Yes, anyone who's coming up to Canada, yeah, we can't wait.
Yeah, I think we can end that recording.